The Freedom class is a small escort operated by the United Federation of Planets Starfleet during the mid to late 24th century. The ship was intended to serve as a quick and cheap replacement for the many older classes of vessel then in service fulfilling the roles of escort and scout. However, the resultant ship made far too many compromises to be effective in its intended roles. During the 2230s, it was becoming ever more apparent to officers within Starfleet that ship classes such as the Miranda and Centaur were growing increasingly long in the tooth and falling behind more modern types in terms of speed, range, and fighting power. While ships such as the Wambandu were being built in far too few numbers to make effective replacements for these aging classes. The primary failing of the Wambandu class, in the eyes of Starfleet Command, was its cost. While an effective ship that was well liked in service, the vessel cost too much in terms of resources and man-hours to construct and maintain, leading to arguments in the Federation General Assembly that eventually led to the cancellation of all but a handful of the capable class. It must be remembered in the period the Federation was going through an unprecedented era of peace, with few threats on the frontier to justify large numbers of new ships in the eyes of the politicians. Starfleet began designing their new escort class in 2331, arguing until 2334 for permission to build any of the proposed vessels, with many in the government feeling that no new ships were needed given the modernity of the Wambandu and large numbers of older ships available. However, the proposed class's low cost, both from a development and production standpoint, eventually won out over the objections of its critics. The design of the ship was finalized in 2335, utilizing mainly off-the-shelf components which had already been developed for other classes of starship. Production began in that year, with an order being placed for 60 ships, 18 of which were approved for immediate laying down and construction to commence. USS Freedom commissioned for her trials in 2337, and faced immediate issues completing them. She failed twice to achieve her cruising speed of warp factor 6, and failed her endurance trials after that by not even managing to make warp factor 8. Her maneuverability, both at warp and at impulse, was also found to be far below that which was intended, and even desirable. A power failure 3 weeks into her trials caused alarm, and the suspension of work on her sisters until the cause was found. The ship fully commissioned into service in 2338, and in total 24 vessels of the class were completed following her, production of further units not being cancelled by the government as was typical, but rather by Starfleet itself. The reasons for the cancellation of the final 35 ships of the class were many, ranging from dissatisfaction with the performance of the design to the discovery of major structural weaknesses and other issues in the hull, lackluster weapons performance, lackluster power at higher warp and impulse speed, and inadequate shielding for the vessel's reactors. In short, the design was flawed, irreparably. As a result of this, the designer's goal to produce a cheap and cheerful warship for the fleet. To its cost, Starfleet found that while a bare-bones, very, very basic ship looked good on paper from a cost standpoint, in service such a ship would be a major disappointment in every area, with even the older Miranda-class ships it was due to replace being found to have superior performance in nearly every way. Those few ships which were completed served in a variety of roles, serving entirely within the Federation core where their limited capabilities would not put them into undue risk. In 2357, some Freedom-class ships would be refitted to accept the nacelle from a Galaxy-class pattern, it being hoped that the newer and more advanced nacelle would permit the ships to achieve higher performance. However, this was only partially successful, mostly helping to alleviate some nagging issues with warp field stability at higher speeds. Many other ships would be decommissioned in the early 2360s and placed into reserve, following the lack of success for this refit. 2 ships would participate in the Battle of Wolf 359, USS Firebrand and USS Felix, and both would be destroyed early in the battle. The wreckage from both vessels remaining in system as a grim reminder of the horror that was the Borg Collective for several years before they were disposed of. Surviving Freedom-class ships were by and large decommissioned by the Dominion War, only a handful of the class seeing use in any form during the conflict, and none serving in frontline combat roles. While a good idea on paper, the Freedom-class escorts proved to Starfleet that the quality of its ships should always be placed ahead of their individual cost. In service, while not outstanding, the Freedom class would do their best, and they are certainly not the absolute failures some pundits claim. And if greater emphasis had been placed on capability and performance, rather than cheap and cost-effective, a design with rather better capabilities may have resulted, which looked very similar to the Freedom class and emulated the great success of the Saladin-class destroyers of a century earlier. But alas, that never happened. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, feel free to like, comment, share, subscribe, all of that junk that much better YouTubers than I are always nagging you to do. Honestly, do it. Also, this has been 2 single nacelle starships in a row, not roll, good grief. There were some spicy hot takes from the last video, so I'll be interested to see what points people bring up on this video about how this definitely canon ship is not canon and is ridiculous because it violates some rules that Gene Roddenberry made because he was mad that he wasn't getting money from a game. So if you have those hot takes, feel free to post them in a comment. Let me know if you were aware of this class. Obviously, this ship appeared in the Best of Both Worlds wreckage after the Battle of Wolf 359. One of the kind of last-minute hodgepodge kit bash designs that was destroyed for the wreckage scene. So it is definitely canon. I really like it. There's just something so funny about how goofy it looks. But I totally understand if people think that it is a horrific abomination. But we're stuck with it. Because it's a horrific abomination that made it on screen. Anyway, if that ruined your day, I'm sorry I can't help you there. Like, drink a nice cup of tea and take a nap. Maybe that'll make it better. But if that didn't ruin your day, your week, your month, or even your year, have a nice day.